right. All right. Make sure, welcome, folks, my folks. Just wanted to go over a few things with you before we get started here. This is going to be something that is extremely important for us to cover as we talk about this great discussion of why Black men should vote or shouldn't. So I am going to be leading this discussion. I'm going to be talking to some powerful men who are at the forefront of leading in our communities, leading our men. And just want to thank my partner, Man-Made Foundation. And I'm going to be speaking to Dr. Dele in a second. And she's going to give her thoughts about what this is, why this is, and exactly where we stand. I just wanted to share a couple of things that I thought were important on this day, just to cue up a couple of things. My job really is to better understand where our brothers are in this space. I completely understand. It's extremely difficult to trust in a system where when you've been a citizen of this country your entire life and you hear about the things that our government has played a part in, that has served to really hurt our community, it's extremely difficult to trust in that process. And so we develop sort of a PTSD, for lack of a better way to explain it. We develop a PTSD of being a citizen in this country. When you hear about your government, when you hear about things like COINTELPRO, when you hear about things like Tuskegee experiment, it's extremely difficult to trust that a system is going to do what it should be designed to do and count your vote. But what I want all of my brothers to know right off the top, and we're going to talk about all of this and unearth all of it, is that there would be no reason for people to work as hard as they work to suppress your vote, to change your vote, and to take away your voting rights if you ever run into trouble with the law. So all of those things are being put into place because your vote does count. People wouldn't be putting all of this energy into taking away your right to vote and suppressing your vote if your vote doesn't count. So with all of that being said, what I want to do is we really do have to hear many different sides to the coin. So I am going to introduce some of those folks. First, I'm going to bring on Dr. Dele of Man-Made Foundation. I got to get her request one more time. And I'm going to bring her in, and she's going to tee up, where we are with all of this. And then we're going to go from there. All right. So let's see here. Looking for her now. There's a whole bunch of requests here. Let's see. There we go. Let's hear from Sister right now. She is a psychologist and she is the founder of the Man-Made Foundation. And so we partnered up on having this talk. And so I want to hear from Sister Kai now. Good day to you, Doctor. How are you?
Good day to you. Thank you so much for using your platform to host such an important message.
But of course,
wanting folks to know it only took one phone call to you for you to step up and say, this conversation is important. Black men need to start talking about this a lot more, and I want to use my platform. Many folks don't understand how urgent this is, but you did, and you stepped up as a leader. So we don't take that for granted. We thank you very much. Thank you,
my sister. I appreciate it. I appreciate you because, when I heard about Man-Made, I initially thought that, of course, the natural assumption would be that the founder would be a man and not a woman.
Right.
And when I went in finding out that you were the founder, that you are the founder, it really intrigued me that much more, because I said, this is the kind of engagement that we need from our sisters to reinvest in us.
Yeah.
And so when I was really interested in partnering with you, because that's the kind of reinvestment that we need from our sisters. Tell us a little about why you wanted to start Man-Made and what you wanted the ultimate goal to be.
Well, the foundation was started due to a personal journey of mine. Growing up with a mom, a single parent, and growing up without a father, and also being a psychologist and seeing all of the challenges that Black men were having and Black women were having with being abused and single parents and the Black man being incarcerated, my brother going to jail. I just decided I was tired of dealing with the problem. Who has figured this out? Forget the therapists, forget social workers, forget educators. Who has walked the walk and figured this out? So I figured the only folks that can really talk about this are the Black men who have come out of challenging situations and actually have accomplished some level of success beyond what they thought they could or what the world thought they should.
Yes.
So I decided to now reach back to the Black man and say, listen, I can't do this on my own. My mother couldn't do this on her own. It's impacted me, my family, it's impacted society. We need to talk to y'all that has done this on some level to come and teach these young men to be better fathers, better sons, so that no other young girl should go through without being with a father. No woman should go through raising 7 children without having a man there to support. No young boy should end up in jail because his father wasn't around. Amen. I just wanted to change the narrative. And I also wanted to psychologically build a narrative of positive male leadership, because folks think that doesn't exist. And my entire life has been about seeing positive Black males, but it wasn't showcased. So I decided to create some press and a narrative around that, and also ask those men to come back and not just be showcased, but also come and do the work.
Yes.
So that's what I did, it for self-preservation and to make sure other young girls and other women did not go through what my mother, I, or my brother went through going to jail. The Black man is part of the solution. We cannot alienate each other and have different conversations. This is not Mars and Venus. We're all on Earth, and we all have to have an Earth conversation.
Okay, so mic drop. Mic drop. Let's stop right there. Mic drop. Mic drop. Mic drop. Let's just sit here for a second. Let's let that marinate, because folks that are on right now are like, say what? Yeah. Times 2, ditto that. This is very much like everything that I discuss in Male versus Man.
I love your
book. Said through the lens, thank you, my sister. This is said through the filter of a woman. So it is so powerful to hear it from our sisters, because that is exactly the case. Well, this isn't Mars, it isn't Venus. We here on Earth together, and we got to work. This is not a competition.
It's not.
We're supposed to be working in conjunction.
It's a collaboration. Yeah, especially since as a woman, we gave birth to the man.
Without a doubt.
So I don't understand the disconnection, but understanding I'm not just a Black woman. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a
Yes, indeed.
psychologist. I'm a social worker. I'm an educator. You know, I am a woman dating Black men. So
Yes.
I'm a part of this experience on every level of my life. I'm affected by the Black man's presence. Every level of
Yes.
my life. So
Yes.
if the conversation cannot be avoided, and we have to hold each other accountable to have this conversation. And Black men are definitely the least to vote. And I feel like let's use this platform to make sure that we talk to our Black men and talk about why they're not voting. But you kind of dropped the mic when you talked about it when you started this. The why is very obvious. So
Totally.
what do we do about that disconnection? We're trying our best with the 100 Made Men call to action, which you're part of. So we thank you so much.
Of course. Well, sister, I can't thank you enough for having this. I think that was the tee up that we needed. I think let's see here. We got up first our brother Frank. And then okay. I think I need to I think I'm gonna call in our first speaker, Frank Malone, and get him to really weigh in on this further. But this is exactly what the folks needed to hear about what our intention is and where we stand.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to say in parting?
I'm just going to say thank you for being accountable. That's what a made man is being about. Stepping up, not talking, but actually walking, doing the work. So thank you for being accountable. And we need more leaders like you. I salute you. And I love this conversation. Thank
Sister,
you.
likewise. I'm gonna get this. Brother Frank will send us a request so I can get him in here, and we can keep this ball rolling.
No, I appreciate that. Well, we
So,
know Brother Frank may be a little late. So
okay,
whoever's there, pull them
all
in.
right. Well, let's see. If we got if Brother Michael Hatcher is on, Brother Hatcher, let me see you out there. So we can get him in here, get this ball rolling. And sister, we will, I'll be talking to you soon, of course.
Definitely. Thank you
All
so
right
much.
then. Yes, of course.
I appreciate you.
Okay. So let's see. Brother Hatcher, you up in the house? Let's see. Let me look here. See Brother Hood there. Looking for Brother Hatcher. Where are you? Don't see him. Don't see him. Okay, let's see here. I see all kinds of folks and don't see my brother there. Let's see. All right. Well, I tell you what. I'm gonna go with to Brother Jeff Hood right now. Brother Hood, I'm gonna come to you and see what this is. Brother Hood is the CEO of National PAL, which is the Police Athletic League. You're talking about a product of Brooklyn, New York. So I know all about the Police Athletic League. And ironically, I had been having a conversation not too long ago about the fact that we need to have programs like the Police Athletic League. I'm out here in Southern California, and I don't know of any program really like the Police Athletic League out here. So I literally was just having this discussion a couple of weeks ago. So it's a pleasure to have you here, my brother. Welcome to this discussion.
Oh, thank you, man. It's a pleasure, and it's nice to know that I have another fellow New Yorker on the phone,
Yes, sir.
on the line as well. I'm actually a Queen. I'm from
All
Queens.
right, next
So,
door neighbors.
but yeah, but my mom is actually from Brooklyn. So
Okay,
yeah, so
okay.
but no, it's all good. And first, before we really get into the topic, man, appreciate all of your persistence in your work, and have has been a follower of you, and as well as your wife as well, in your careers. And major ups and congrats, man, and continue to fight the good fight, and continue to showcase well. I'm proud to know that you are a fellow New Yorker.
Thank you, my brother. Well, we are aligned now. So
No doubt.
you like I always say to my brothers, when I get another brother in arms, I'm like, you stuck with me. So so we got much more battle to engage in together.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, I started off at the top speaking about the fact that our young brothers really do feel like their voices are unheard. We
Sure.
really do feel like no matter what, I can't tell you how many times I've had a brother say to me, there's no difference between Trump and Biden. And what I finally began to realize was what they were truly saying was a white person is a white person. A white man is a white man. This country is white. It's been run by white people. And so it doesn't make a difference what white man we put in there, what white woman we put in there. We will not be heard. Our problems will not be addressed, because we all know, any logical human being knows, that there is a huge difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But what they're saying is that our needs are never addressed. Our needs are never met, right?
Right.
And so this is where they're coming from. What are some of the things that you've been hearing when you speak to young brothers, and what do you feel like are some of the things that we need to impart to them to try to get them to get activated in this process?
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that. You start with that, right? Because I've heard that as well. But then I'm going to add a third wheel to your statement, and that is that politics is politics, and even having President Obama in office, you may have even heard, I know I have heard from several people, is yes, he was African American president and all, but then he didn't even do enough.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I've heard that one as well. And
Yes.
and yes, politics is politics, and you have to kind of work your way through the minutia of it all, and the game of it all, to be able to try and make and bring about change, and look at those wins. But I'm glad that you dealt with me as it relates to our young people. Yes, as it relates to Powell, I'm a Powell kid as well. Grew up in Powell in Queens. I started this very thing, Dondre. I started in August a National Powell host from the Voices of Youth Town Hall series, 18 city Town Hall series. So we're going to all of these cities all across the country where we are engaging young people with the change agents from those communities, meeting with the mayor, the chief of police, superintendent of schools, congressmen, and what have you. And the thing that I first, when I get these elected officials or what have you on, is I said, look, this is about our young people and hearing from them. It's not about you running for office.
Yes.
Right. So I will mute you and cut you off as soon as I see you going down that path. Right. And thankfully, it's been great, because our young people are coming up, and first they're being invited to the table. Right. That's part of this whole issue is the voice of our young people a lot of times is muted. Right. So they're not being heard. They're not being engaged with. They're not being taken seriously. Right. So when we have these young people on and they're talking with these mayors and congressmen across the country about, well, why is it that in my community, I'm in the inner city, and the school that I attend, we don't even have books, but then the school across town, not only do they have books, but they got brand new books.
Brand new books.
You know, and so those types of questions. And then as well, yes, I'm a product of PAL. I'm the CEO of National PAL, but our young people as well is looking at it from the standpoint of law enforcement reform and relations as well, right? So we're talking with the young people about, look, yes, you have to be held accountable. You have to hold them accountable. And the way that you do that is engaging with these elected officials, letting them know, look, I may be a high school senior right now and I may not vote, but I'm going to vote next year. You know, so I'm going to get intrinsically involved and engaged and hold you accountable as well, you know, to these things that I hold true. But it's first and foremost about inviting them to the table and listening. You know, we do a lot of lip service that we invite them to the table, but then we go deaf on them and we don't really, you know, listen to what they're really saying.
Yes.
I think we really have to, they have a lot to say.
Yes.
And back to your initial question of how we can engage, we have to be positive role models and model the appropriate behavior for them as well.
Absolutely. So in my book, Male versus Man, I talk about this throughout the book in the importance of us as men modeling behavior that we want our young brothers to mirror.
Exactly.
If you know, our brothers are only mirroring behavior that they have seen. So if they see us not voting, if they see us not performing our civic duties, if they hear the fact that we think that it's all a conspiracy, we think that our vote doesn't count, it makes perfect sense that when they come of age, you don't magically come out of that bubble. You are a product of that messaging. What are some of the things, and I think you touched on something that's really important, which is key, is us really listening to them. If we aren't listening to them, what would make any of them think that they are going to be listening to them? So that's one of the keys.
But they have to be invited to the table, right? To be listened to. Or to ask them. Like, for example, one of the questions that I asked the young people, and mind you, let me tell you, these from the Voices of Youth Town Hall series, they're moderated by young people as well, right? So it's not me, it's not another adult, it's moderated by one of their peers, right? So when they come on and they're asking a question of, well, why is it that when I'm pulled over, I get a different type of response than may our lighter skinned brothers? You know, why is it that the level of accountability seems to be heightened when it's a person of a color that looks like me versus another, right? So we talk about that, you know, not just in that, but within PAL. I mean, heck, we have a captive audience with law enforcement. That's who we're with. You know, and the thing that I also try and aid in our young people to help them to understand is a few things. One, because when the rioting and all started, I had one of our young ladies, one of our young girls in our program called me from Florida, right? And she's like, she calls me Pop. She's like, Pop, all of this craziness is going on. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I should trust police officers or not trust or whatever. I said, look, let me ask you this. Do you know any young people that have done some pretty bad and heinous types of things? She said, yeah, Pop, I have. I says, okay. Does that make all young people bad?
Right.
She said, no, sir. I said, okay. Same way that what happened in Minneapolis and other places, but I'm just using Minneapolis now. What happened in Minneapolis was a terrible thing. It was murder, you know? So, but that doesn't make all law enforcement bad.
That's right.
You know, but it starts in PAL with us bringing both sides to the table to have that type of honest and constructive conversation and dialogue, to be able to find out where there's synergy, where there's like-mindedness. Because again, some of these young people, their mom and dad is a law enforcement officer too.
You're right. Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
so they have to understand as well. It's like, wow, okay, if all law enforcement is bad, well then that makes my mom and my dad bad, you know, and I'm with them all the time. But I think that we have to be more intentional. And I've said this to several people. We need to be able to have conversations with people and engage people that don't necessarily look like you and I.
Yes.
And don't worry about them being a little bit of uncomfortable, right? We're not the only ones that garner the role of have to be uncomfortable, right? It's okay for them to be uncomfortable. And if they're uncomfortable, that means they're listening. You know, so we have to make sure that we are including them in the conversation. And the way that you and I are having this conversation, I think what also needs to be brought about is, well, let's bring some people on this that don't look like us and get their perspective to be able to learn and see what they're feeling, what they're hearing, or what they're, you know, because well, there's a whole lot, as you can see, that can go into this, DeAndre. But I think that we have to be honest and be positive role models to our young people. And like I said earlier, I'm not sure what area of Brooklyn you grew up, but yeah, I grew up in inner city Queens, right? So, okay, well, yes, you can relate to what I'm getting ready to say.
Not the gentrified one, the real one.
Yes, exactly. That's why I said I know where you're from now.
Yes.
So you grow up and you hear some of us Black males referring to our beautiful African-American female sisters as, excuse me, bitches and hoes. Okay, so if our young people hear us saying that enough, well, they think that that's acceptable, right? So are we modeling the appropriate behavior that we want them to be able to go out in society and act? Right. So we have to make sure that we are accountable. And then when we're accountable and we're teaching that way, then they are able to take that mantra to use that in situations and opportunities to where it is truly a negative, you know, in an inappropriate situation.
Absolutely. Well, brother, I think that, you know, what we've been both saying in this portion of it is that we have to, the most important takeaways is that we have to begin to model for our young brothers what we want mirrored, and that they need to see us performing our civic duties when we expect them to perform their civic duties. And so again, I love it because in my book I talk about this, you know, too, which is, you know, a man takes responsibility even for the things that aren't his to take responsibility for. That's what men do. So, brother, we got a lot to do in this battle. Like I said, you stuck with me. So look for me to get back in touch. Thank you for joining us. We got some more brothers up on the slate, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be in New York shortly, so I'm going to be in touch.
Please do. And I look forward to including you and having some other off-camera dialogue to get you involved and engaged as well.
Got to do it.
All right.
Thank you, my brother. We'll talk soon.
All right, now. Take care. Be blessed.
All right. That was my brother, Jeff Hood, CEO of National PAL, Police Athletic League, which I think is really important for our young brothers and our young sisters to have a relationship with the police that work in our communities. It's one of the dynamic things that are missing. Shout out to my sister, Tracy Blackwell. I see you. I love you. Shout out to my sister, Vanessa Spencer. You know, I talked about this recently where my sister Vanessa said She said, she said, black males are about to become the white women of 2020. And by that, she was meaning that that voting block is so essential for us being able to move past this administration, and we're missing it. And by virtue of the fact that that voting block is missing out of the equation, we could possibly see another 4 years. Like white women were missing and they either voted for Trump or they just decided not to vote, which is actually a vote for him. Black males could possibly be the white women of 2020 as it relates to this election period. And I thought that that was super deep. So shout out to my sister Vanessa on that. I think I'm going to bring in brother Alfred Edmond, who is a powerful brother that he is the senior vice president of Black Entertainment. I know he is their managing editor. And I've known this brother for years. I don't want to say how many years because then that would date the two of us, and I ain't down for that. But enough, significant enough years. How about that? For me to know this brother's character, for me to know this brother's expertise. And this is one of the reasons why we invited him to be a part of this discussion. My brother, welcome.
Man, it's good to see you.
Man, good to see you,
man. So one of the things that I thought was really important in having this discussion was when I opened up, I talked about how, you know, our people, you can't be a citizen of this country as a Black citizen and not have the PTSD that comes with it, not feeling like everything is a conspiracy against us, not feeling like ultimately when we go about working the system the way the system was supposed to be designed to work, that ultimately it doesn't work that way for us. What are some of the things that you have been experiencing in the street and talking to our younger brothers? And what are some of the things that you feel like they need to hear during this extremely important time in history?
Well, brother just said it. First of all, we got to listen to them. And then we have to be honest. They're right. The system wasn't built for us. When the system works correctly, it works against us. So my own son, I was like, I'm not going to tell you that this was made for us. It wasn't. So we have to operate accordingly. So first is listen. Second, you talked about showing as a role model how they should model what they do. That means we got to bring them with us.
Yep.
Yeah, whether it's my son or other young men, I bring them with me wherever I go. I don't tell them what I did. I don't tell them what they should do. I bring them with me because that brings them into, whether it's the courtroom, whether it's to a conference. Bring these young brothers with you and let them talk. Let them say what they got to say. Yeah, they got to learn how to say it appropriately, just like we did when we were their age. But they got to have a voice, and they can't be just at election time when that happens. That has to be all the time. Yes. You know, now we're like, oh, we need you to vote. Well, did you need me last year? Did you need me 2 years ago? Right. But now we're trying to change, now we're talking. So this conversation, and bro, I love you because you're always sparking these conversations and driving these conversations. They got to happen all the time with our young brothers. We can't just call them when we need them like it's a booty call or something. We got to call them all the time. Yeah. So we got to bring them with us. And then the thing is, we have to stop acting like what we're doing is voting for the person who's for our best interests. That's not what we're doing. Yes. We have to operate as Black people, as people of color in this country, in a defensive mode. Yes. I'm voting for Biden because he's likely to do the least damage. It's a self-defense. It's like defensive driving. So when we start telling our young people, brothers in particular, that, oh no, this is the best candidate, it doesn't ring true. No, Biden's the best because he's going to do the least damage to us in our community. Okay, so let's stop right there. One of the things that, and I'm going to pick up on your analogy of driving. Picture two cars.
picture yourself having a car that constantly breaks down, that constantly, when you feel like you're on the freeway and you're going, it breaks down right in the middle of the freeway. It puts you in harm's way. You got to try to find a way to push your vehicle to the side without being hit with oncoming traffic coming at you at 75 miles an hour. Every time you think that the engine goes out, the alternator goes out, the starter goes out. Every single time you think that this car is about to do its job for you, it completely goes out. It's completely in that space where you're dysfunctional
and unsafe.
You can't unsafe. You can't depend on it. All of those things. So I come to you and I say, Brother Alfred, listen, I got a car that I'm going to sell you. Now, there's a couple of things we need to have addressed on it. You may have to change the oil. You might have to rotate a couple of tires. You might have to change the spark plugs. You might even have to change out the windshield wipers on it. But this car runs. And it's going to be serviceable to you. It's going to get you from point A to point B.
And it's safe.
And it's safe. It's going to serve you. Yes, you are still going to have to service it in order for it to run better. You're going to have to hold it accountable by addressing those particular things, but it is safe and it's going to get you from point A to point B. Now, the first car that I mentioned is Donald Trump.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
The second car that I'm trying to sell you is Joe Biden. We already know. Look, first of all, let's just start here. There are no perfect candidates.
There are no perfect cars on this lot.
Perfect cars on this lot. They don't exist.
Yes.
What we're asking you to do is invest in a car that's going to get you from point A to point B and won't get you killed in the process.
Thank you. Let me take that analogy even better. Who you want to ride with? Who you want to ride with? You want to ride with this person, you're trying to control the car and he's yanking the wheel, he's opening the door while you're driving, or do you want to drive with the guy who he may not be the best riding companion, but he's safe and he's going to let you get from point A to point B. Your analogy is perfect because that's what we're trying to do. And again, in our communities as a nation, but in our communities in particular, our goal is to survive and thrive, and we are barely surviving what's happening now. When you talk about 230,000 plus people dead, and that's literally like your car got hijacked and you're headed toward a wall, and your analogy is perfect.
Man.
So it's not about choosing the next great leader, this wonderful. When we say that to young people, it sounds like we're just BSing them.
Yeah,
but
totally.
They know we're trying to pick a candidate that we can survive and thrive and get from point A to point B safely. Then it becomes a very easy conversation.
Yeah, I think the gems out of this, the nuggets out of this, is that we want our young brothers to know that we're not choosing a candidate that's going to, all of a sudden end racism overnight. We all become millionaires. We all own, 50 acres of land.
And no matter who gets elected, that's the case. That's the same with President Obama.
Period.
It was never that. And the other thing I want to make sure I say, brother, before my time is up with you, we got to stop focusing only on the White House and the presidency.
Yes.
These down ballot races, who's your mayor, who's the sheriff, who's the DA, that's actually going to have a much more immediate impact on young brothers, and me and you too, in our lives than who's sitting in the White House. So by laser focusing on, we got to get these brothers vote all up and down the ballot. Let's say that who's in the White, they're so distant that while they have impact on us, it's not immediate. Right. But who is the sheriff? Who's the DA? Who's in the school board? All that stuff will have an immediate impact on your life. So
we are definitely going to meet them before we ever meet the president or the vice president.
They might be our relatives. They might be our friends' relatives. These are people that are literally in our faces. So again, we can hold them accountable. We can't get a meeting in the White House to hold them, whoever is accountable.
Right.
But that local official, you can roll up on their doorstep and say, listen, you're going to deal with my child, you're going to deal with my issues. We got to do that. And then brothers, young people in general, and young brothers in particular, will see the relevance.
Yes. Yes, brother, these are the nuggets that our young brothers need to hear, and our sisters, of course. But we're addressing the needs that we feel like our young brothers really need to have, because right now they are deactivated, and these gems need to activate them when they hear that we're not voting for the perfect candidate that's going to snap their fingers and make life beautiful for Black people all of a sudden overnight. What we're doing right now is we're talking about damage control.
Exactly.
Damage control.
And as I tell my kids, my son is a young man and he's in his late 20s now, but my kids had the advantage of kind of being brought up in the system. They're from Brooklyn too, by the way, so Brooklyn love. Three of them still live in Brooklyn. Yes. But I told them the president is not Santa Claus.
Right.
No matter who it is. They got a campaign, they got to make promises, but the president is not Santa Claus. That's not what it's about. And we got to continue to tell Black people in general, but young Black people in particular, the president's not Santa Claus. It's not a genie. He's a person doing a job. He's flawed, and it is what it is. But your thing about damage control, defensive driving, getting us safely from point A to point B, that's where we should come from, because then we'll be seen as credible by young people. They don't believe us.
Yes.
It's like we're teaching Santa Claus. And they're like,
that's exactly right.
You told us 10 years ago there's no Santa Claus. Now you're telling me the person in the White House is going to be Santa Claus.
Right.
So when we're more authentic and honest with them about what the reality is, and then we listen to them and hear them, they'll do it. They'll trust us. And when they trust us, they'll do it.
Yes, brother. Yes. These were the nuggets that we needed. My brother, it is always a pleasure to talk to you. Every time I have when you and I have conversations about the most mundane thing, it always leads to something that makes the earth better. And that's why I love
when it comes to you, it's not about how often I speak to you. It's just getting to speak to you. I mean, we're so connected, Dondre. You know I love you. I love you, brother. So
likewise, my brother, always. Yep. And like I said to my brother Jeff, you already know you stuck with me.
No doubt.
Let's get it. All right.
Try to get rid of me, man. Try to get rid of me.
Yes, indeed. I'm gonna talk to you soon.
No doubt.
Yes, sir. Man, so another powerful conversation with another powerful king, and we got to some nuggets that we really need to give to our folks. Shout out to my sister, Josie Harris. These are all of my sisters that really hold your brother down. You know, my queen holds me down, real talk, but holds me up. But my sisters that I aforementioned, my sister Tracy Blackwell, my sister Vanessa Spencer, Josie Harris, these are the kinds of sisters that really, really, really hold me up. So I need to, let's see who else I got in the house. Because it's about time that I get my next king in here for another powerful discussion. I'm just like, man, I could do this all day, but I know folks got to go. But don't go anywhere, because I got somebody I really need you to hear from. Let me go to my brother Lasana real quick. Let me see if he's up in here. Get some requests. Let's see. I love you too, Josie. Thank you, my sister. Brother Lasana, hit me with a request real quick, because I know you up in here. Let's see here. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? I went Tribe Called Quest on you. Where you at? To all right, hip hop heads all up in here. Come on, Lasana, hit me one more. Hit me with one more request. Okay, there we go. Where you at? Boom. Black man. So this king right here is an educator. He is an entrepreneur. And he is an author. And real talk, So many people, you know, often ask me, because I always say that I never make any major decisions in my life without calling on my counsel. And everyone wants to know, well, who's a part of your counsel? I'm about to introduce you to one of the major people in the counsel that I have formed for my life, for myself as a man. Every time I speak to this brother, I learn something new that is not hyperbole, that is truth. I'm going to be talking about one of the things that he actually introduced me to that I have righteously stolen from him. He knows because I steal from him from time to time, but righteously, because I always, you know, shout him out when I do. But without further ado, my brother Lasana Hotep. Brother Lasana, how you doing, man?
What's up, Dre? It's wonderful to be on your IG Live, man, and having this powerful conversation.
Man, the kings that have come before you have helped me to access some powerful languaging that we need to give to our young brothers and even our older brothers, because we've seen now that it's not just our younger brothers. I mean, brother Shaquille O'Neal, brother Mike Tyson, they have come out publicly to admit that they are first-time registered voters this year. We would have thought that, you know, 12 years ago when we were voting for Barack Obama to come into office, that might have activated our brothers to come out of the weeds and become registered voters and to vote for possibly the first Black president. But even that didn't activate them. But in this time right now, where we are, this time is so perilous for us that it has activated brothers like that. So it's not just about our young brothers. It's about our older brothers who never felt the need until now. What do you attribute our younger brothers and our older brothers who feel so deactivated in this process? What do you attribute that to? And what can we do to try to activate them to get into this portion of the process?
Well, it's several things to attribute it to, but I want to put everything in perspective as well. In the 2016 national election, 81% of Black men voted for the Democratic candidate. So it's not like they didn't vote. One of the biggest issues we have, and Black women voted for the Democratic candidate at 98%. So there is a difference in how that played itself out for Black men and Black women, but Black men aren't like at 40%. The other issue we need to be concerned about is not just those who participated in the electoral franchise, but also the Black voter turnout. And 2016 saw a great steep dip in Black voter turnout. And that's what we're really talking about, right?
Yeah.
When we do vote, we tend to vote in a significant majority, a particular way. But why we don't vote, what you're talking about. So I put it in, it's a lot of things we could break down, but I put it in three basic camps. You got the conspiracy theory camp.
Yes.
You got the camp that's alienated. And then you got the camp that just needs to be politically educated. So the political, the conspiracy theory camp, they are interested in what we affectionately refer to as barbershop talk. And in the barbershop, everybody's a genius and everybody knows all the answers to everything. They know who landed on the moon, who didn't land on the moon. They know round, square, octagon. I mean, we're all geniuses in there.
The earth is flat. Yeah, the earth is
top
flat.
five. Yeah, we know. But with the challenge with the conspiracy theory group is that's all great if it's something that's benign as your top 5 rappers of all time. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But when we start talking about power, right? When we start talking about the way in which the system works, it doesn't jive, right? And I remember the late great Tupac Shakur. I was reading one of the articles after he had got released out of his prison stint, and he was talking about these types of dudes, and he was saying this dude was breaking down the Illuminati to him and all these secret things, and he was listening to the dude. He said, and you saying all of this is going on in this top secret? He was like, yeah, it's top secret. He said, then how in the hell you locked in here with me and you know all this?
Right.
So, so that's one thing we need to know about the dudes who know all the deep science, right?
Yes.
If it's so deep and it's so underground and it's taking place in the basement of the Vatican, how do you know?
How do you know
In the middle of the hood at the barbershop, right? So that's something that we have to question. Those who are alienated, it's really a critique of the system, right? And a couple of the brothers who were on earlier, we're talking about some of the valid critiques we have of the system. My thing is this, is those who have a critique of the system, they have to understand that the electoral franchise is just one aspect of power.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? This is one aspect of power. And what I tell people all the time is that Martin Luther King Jr. transformed Black life and the life of everybody in America, and he didn't even have the right to vote in Atlanta. So what I'm saying is this, is that you can be a part of the electoral franchise, but to get the vote, we didn't have the vote. So there's nothing you can do. Then also, another component that a lot of our community is left out of is the whole piece of fundraising, right? I always give the analogy, I tell people, if I'm running for office and my heart's in the right place and I get a call in my office and my assistant say, hey, you got so-and-so on line 1 who's a donor, you got so-and-so on line 2 who's a nice community member. You know, these people take the money because the money takes for those signs and for the ads and for all that kind of stuff. And we just haven't been organized on that side of the influential equation. So we have to understand that the electoral franchise means pushing from the outside, using the vote, as well as looking at how do we organize our resources for those who feel alienated. Another thing about those who feel alienated, if you are alienated and you are so adamant that the vote don't make a difference, then what you have to do is show me the non-voting way, right, in which you're transforming community. So let's say you're going to say the vote don't matter. You so woke that the vote don't matter. Now show me the other thing that you're doing, because I can buy that, right? I don't shame people who don't vote. I don't attack people for their position.
Likewise.
But what we're talking about is a shift in power. So if you know all this knowledge that shows me how the vote don't work, then go ahead, and I'm open to hearing the thing that we need to do that's going to get us power. And then that third group that needs political education. This is the issue that we have, is that people have had very little time connecting the real life, pedestrian, everyday issues that people in our community experience with politics. Because the way in which it's explained is never connected. No one explains politics the way it is. This is one reason why we are involved in politics, is that everyone at the state, county, and federal level are taxed, right? And our tax dollar goes into coffers. We're in an electoral representative republic. You elect a representative to go make decisions for you, because you're not going to make every single one of these decisions. And the people who you elect to make those decisions, they split up the money. And then you can tell them how you want your money spent. No one explains to people politics that way. Their main responsibility is to decide what to do with the money. Right? And our people can understand money because they always talk about getting money. They got stacks of money on their ears on Instagram, so they understand money. We have to tell people that you have to put somebody in office and you have to tell them what to do with your money.
This is such, these nuggets are so deep that we really gotta like strip it all the way down, because that is like, and you and I, of course, we're like, that's about as stripped down as it gets. but there are some folks that are still sitting there going, yeah, I think I kind of know what you're saying. But I'm going to bring up something, because I had a brother who, and here's the interesting part. I had a brother who is a hip hop artist, fledgling. And of course he was on the side of, oh, here you go. So I can't even believe you wasting your time with all of this voting nonsense. We're all doomed. These were his words. We're all doomed. That was it. There was no plan. There was no, here's what we should do. Here are the nutrients that you need in order to fortify this deficit that you're in. None of that. We're doomed. Let's sit here. Let's wait to die. No man no man that I know of waiting to die.
Mm-hmm.
No man. Males do.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, males do that all the time. No man sits by waiting to die. So I asked him, I said, so black man, you mean to tell me that the best that you got to give me as another man, as a fellow brother, as a fellow soldier, that we're doomed, that we just getting ready to die? So to your point, they never have any answers about what to do in lieu of voting. So to that, what do we say to those brothers when we're engaged in a conversation and we now have to deal with that? To that, you say what?
Well, in that particular instance, I just tell them, do you have any problems in your life? Let's talk about the problems that you really face. And then every problem that they will give me, I can connect it to how it has something to do with the system that we're in, right? So that's the thing about it, is that the conversation needs to be reversed. It's not necessarily a conversation of telling you why you should vote. The conversation, what are your problems? Oh, that's a problem. Let me show you who we're electing at the local, at the state, county, city, federal level. This is how it's impacting you, right? So you have an issue with your baby mama. Okay, so you have a baby mama drama. Well, you know that comes from a law about child support, right? And you know the people who make the decision about how child support is meted out and how you have to go to court and how it's garnished from your check, right? So whatever your thing is, right? If you having an issue with being formerly incarcerated and you now have stripped from certain kinds of liberties. Okay, well, let me talk to you about how that's connected. See, the thing about it is that disconnect. But see, the thing about it is it's not by accident. Black men the society is designed to make black men feel alienated from systems of power, right?
Yes.
And so
that we can disengage ourselves.
It's a combination. It's designed to make us feel alienated from positions of power and what true power is. Substitute that with false senses of power. And you know what the false senses of power is because we brag about the same three things on every
money,
other album.
booty.
Yeah. in cars, right? In stuff like that. So we know that. But the other part is that the entire system has totally disenfranchised people from being citizens, right? And you have to understand that the United States of America has gone through a major shift post-1980. And the fiduciary in America, right up until around 1980 or so, was the citizenry, okay? After 1980, the primary person that had all the power in the state and that people had to lend themselves to is called the shareholder. And so when you listen to the United States of America, people with power, they're not talking to any of us as citizens. They rarely even talk about citizens, right? They're talking to shareholders. And they're accountable to shareholders. They're not accountable to anyone else because after they adopted the Milton Friedman doctrine that basically said that a corporation, which basically run most nation states because they're transnational, right? They don't have any responsibility to the citizens of the society that they're in, to the communities that they're immersed in. They only have a responsibility to make profit in their shareholders. And so this shift had quietly taken place because, like, if you listen to a lot of people who are in positions of power, right, there's a particular omission, and especially from one particular party. They never use the term democracy. They never talk about democracy. They never talk about participation of the individual. Like, it's never a thing, right? They will talk about the economy. They will call other people other names, but they will never say democracy. Right? They will never say one person, one vote, because we have been socialized to be disassociated from being citizens. And this dissociation, and we know that in this particular society we're in, whenever those types of things take place, it's worse in our communities, right? So now you have a group of people who have been disempowered, who have been misinformed, And then you also have a group of people who simultaneously have been given these false notions of power in these imaginary spaces where they claim power. So like me, you were talking about how you're from Brooklyn and other guys from New York. I'm an LA dude. You live in the LA area, right? I live in Oakland now, but I'm an LA guy. I'm an LA guy, and my entire community I grew up in was organized by these street organizations of people called gangs, right? But we were all patrolling these spaces that we did not what?
Own.
Didn't own nothing. It's just wherever your mama paid rent.
Which is why I'm like, what?
Nipsey said it. Your gang is where your mama paid rent. That's how Nipsey put it. And so we are literally hunkering down, right? And digging our heels in to protect a so-called area that we don't
even own.
Because you have to understand that if you're not going to let people engage in real power, the only way to keep them engaging in real power is to give them false power. And so what we have to do when we're talking about appealing to certain demographics in our community is address these notions of false power that we have been clinging to, right? And so so it's a lot of layers there, because one thing I teach people is this: people do not let facts get in the way of what they believe. And what we have to do is get to their fundamental belief system. And then that's why we have to let our brothers talk to us. And then we have to respond to challenge some of these belief systems that they're rooted in.
Yeah, man. You know, you're talking about what I often refer to as perception versus reality. And I often ask people, what's the most important thing? Is it your perception or your reality? And people go, reality. And I go, wrong. Your perception is the most important thing, because your perception now becomes your reality. So if you think that everything about the government is a conspiracy theory, if you think that voting doesn't work for you and your people, it won't work for you and your people because you're not even engaged in it. So yes, now it doesn't work because now you're not engaged, right? So now we become the dog that is chasing its tail. So I drew the analogy earlier, and I think you might have been present for it, about what kind of car we want to travel in right now. Right now, we're traveling in a car that's completely dangerous. It breaks down on us in the midst of freeway traffic, exposing us to oncoming 75 mile per hour cars. And what we're trying to do now is to get a vehicle that is serviceable, that will now control the damage that's being imparted to our communities, right? And that's the way I think we need to begin to explain or engage our young brothers in order to get them to understand. And I'm not telling you that we're voting for a perfect candidate. Barack Obama wasn't perfect. Barack Obama, Barack Obama was the president. Everybody thought that Barack Obama was going to be the president of the United States of Black America. And Barack Obama was the president of the United States of America. So many Black people have an issue with him because he didn't do enough for Black America. White America has an issue with him because their perception was that he did all of this stuff for Black people. It has to be, because he can't be speaking to my needs. He's a Black man and I'm white, right? So there's the perception again. So now I want to get to something that you brought to me in a conversation that we had, that I told you earlier. I stole it.
Okay.
And I use it all the time now because it crystallized everything that I teach people, but I actually had a launch pad. You gave me a launch pad from which to move with. You said there's a huge difference between intention and impact. So everybody talks about Joe Biden and this crime bill. Joe Biden didn't create the crime bill. His name was on it. Black Caucus's name is on it. A whole bunch of folks' name is on that crime bill. During the 90s, the crack epidemic, it was crazy. It was bananas in and out of our communities. They didn't know what to do. People were trying to figure out, well, how do we create something that will incentivize people to not commit crimes? So their intention was to come up with something that would try to deter people from committing crimes. What they didn't anticipate was the impact that it would ultimately have on our communities. That's what the crime bill was. I have been trying to get people to understand that in times of desperation, you do things, you throw things up against something up against the wall to see if it sticks. And when you see, wow, this really isn't working, you begin the process of painting over that because this isn't working. To that, you say what?
So when I was in graduate school, I took a course on contemporary conservatism. And the instructor of the course kept trying to influence what I was going to do my my graduate writing and research on. And he is a conservative writer and professor. And he kept trying to get me to write and research on Black people who opposed busing. That's what he kept trying to influence me. So finally, I just stopped one day and just said, look, man, I'm not going to do my research, my graduate research on why Black people oppose busing, because let me explain something to you, okay? Mm-hmm. Black people were against busing because we hated getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to ride an hour and a half to go to a school where they called us niggas.
Right.
White people were against busing because they hate Black people. We both didn't want busing, but for two different reasons. You're trying to conflate them and make it seem like it's the same reason. And that's the same thing with the crime bill. There were people who were part of the crime bill who knew it was going to lead to mass incarceration because they were working with CAC and other people. But there were other people trying to solve a problem of a scourge that was going on in our community and try to de-incentivize crimes, right? What happens is that's why it's not just position on position or vote on vote. People try to do this conflation, right? They do this false notion of it's the same thing, and it's not the same thing. And so people were trying to focus on that particular aspect of Joseph Biden's record, right? Under the assumption and out of the context that that bill came about with an assembly of people, a group of people who thought it was going to address issues of crime within certain communities, but there's another group of people who were part of the CAC who wanted to see what we have now is the mass incarceration. Prison industrial complex. And so one of the things that comes with political education is context. Another thing that comes with political education is strategy. But the most important thing that comes with political education is agenda. And one of the things about alienating us from power, making us feel defeated in terms of the electoral franchise and elected positions across the board, is to move us away from agendas. When groups get things happening, it's because they have ability to see their agenda in action. And I saw somebody on the comments say, are we going to talk about Ice Cube? See, the thing about the Ice Cube situation is, one, people took it and just ran with it, and the memes are out of control. The social media was made to drag people. But what he attempted to do, let's go back to intent and impact too. What he intended to do was try to create some type of agenda with some scholars to speak to some issues so that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party could be receptive to Black people. My concern with Ice Cube and others who have positioned themselves in these leadership positions trying to advocate for us is that when they receive critiques from Black people, they're not demonstrating the same patience, right? The same diplomacy and the same compassion that they do when they're reaching across the people who have heretofore who have shown no love to Black people. So all I'm saying is this, right? Because I love Ice Cube, right? Bruh,
Me
When
too.
black people critique you, we don't deserve the clap back, right? Right? Even if we came at you wrong.
Particularly because you appointed yourself our spokesman. You
Yeah.
can't get on social media now and say, I don't give a F about what y'all saying. Bruh, you appointed yourself our spokesman. The very nature of being a spokesman for a people is being accountable to them.
And my whole thing is that the issue is not that he's trying to put together an agenda. It's when you come back to have a conversation with us, it's very demeaning, it's very combative, and it's very
dismissive.
Right? It's dismissive, right?
Yes.
And that's what I would like to see from these people who are appointing themselves leaders. Because one, I always have a challenge with people just appointing themselves leaders or people just picking out our leaders. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Totally.
But the other thing is that, are you going to be in dialogue? Are you going to use that same charm and wit and diplomacy that you're using to engage people with power on our end? And so intent versus impact. So I don't get into tit for tat, point for point, especially around this 2020 election about what Joseph Biden did or what Joseph Biden didn't do. I'm not a really big fan of Joseph Biden, but I am politically savvy enough to know that with an agenda, right, and with the appropriate organizing, there's an opportunity to see some victories for people of African ancestry that's sustainable, right, and substantive in that particular party, because we are in a dual party system, right? We're not like in other nations where there's 5 really competitive parties. We're primarily, even if you're independent and all those other types of things, they don't leverage that same type of power in this state, right? And we have to see if we're going to support, if people decide to support the Democrats, the strategy attached to it, right? And the same thing if you're going to support a conservative party. What is your strategy attached to it? My whole thing is about anything about power is never confuse methods with the desired outcomes, but we got to really talk about what are the methods, what are the lengths we're willing to go, and what does it ultimately look like? Because again, one of the reasons why I bring up democracy is this: is you can't do a conflation of they're all the same when you literally have one group, right, that's trying to eliminate votes. Right?
Period.
Their entire approach to voting season is to eliminate how many people vote. That's the antithesis of democracy.
Period.
Right? And we're not just talking about what's going to go and determine the presidential election in terms of the Electoral College. Every single vote, from your county to the propositions to all the ballot measures to all the state representatives, none of those are determined by the Electoral College. And so when you have a group that's trying to get rid of your vote on all of those things, that should bring you pause. That should bring you question at least their commitment to democracy or their commitment to this particular system. And if they're not demonstrating a commitment to that system of individuals having voice through the ballot, then what is the system that they're advocating for?
You know, it's so interesting. That's why I love, first of all, why I love talking to you about anything. Also why I had you on last, because I knew we was getting ready to dig deep. So one of the, and I touched on this at the top in speaking to, whenever I speak to brothers in general, young or old, who are just disenchanted with the process, disenchanted with feeling like democracy actually works, disenchanted with the fact that they feel like their votes really don't matter. And I keep having to say to them over and over again, listen, if your vote didn't matter, people wouldn't be working so hard to take it away from you. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be a law that when you commit a crime, we take your voting privileges away from you. There wouldn't be so much effort to suppress your vote. There wouldn't be so much effort to steal ballots or to do things like, oh well, this signature doesn't look like that. Your vote doesn't count. All of those things wouldn't be put into place if your vote really didn't matter. And I talked a little bit about this, and I just wanted to touch this, just put our finger on the pulse of this for a second, because I think that much of it is somewhat related. We talk about our brothers who are in gangs, talk about these white militias. We talk about folks that feel like they don't see democracy at work. Our votes don't matter. Many of these things are formed when people feel like they aren't a part of our society as a whole, like the wholeness of each other. So some of these folks are feeling like they've been made to feel like a misfit. They're outcast. They aren't getting the kind of attention and information and instruction and ultimately the accountability. Now, again, they're being formed and driven. Their traffic is being driven for different reasons. So white militias are not being driven as by the same things that our gangs are being driven by. But again, all of them are being driven by those same relatable issues. And that is that they are disconnected from a love of their community. And so we have a common thread in that regard. And I think it's taking us to a time right now where if we don't get the current administration out of there, we are going to see a straight up, heads up civil war that no one really is prepared for. What do you say to that?
The Civil War that started in 1862 never ended. That's this is what we have to understand. Every time the United States of America had a chance to come face to face and confront racism for what it is, it decided to take a process of how do we accommodate racists, not how do we become anti-racist. Right? So when we had a chance after the Civil War in 1865 to rearrange our structure once 4 million enslaved Africans had been freed, and we decided that all of us were not going to leave the United States of America and either go to somewhere in the Caribbean or to Liberia. You know, a lot of people don't understand that Liberia is called Liberia because it's a state of former African Americans who left the United States and went to Africa, and that's why the capital was Monrovia, because President Monroe was at the time. So it was two ideologies: one, repatriate back to Africa; some stay here. Those of us and our ancestors who stayed here, we thought that we were in a new day. And up until the end of Reconstruction in 1877, there were some changes. But that's at that point when they made that compromise of 1877 and said, we're going to leave the blacks, in their words, to the devices of the Southern people. And then that's when they introduced Jim Crow, right? When they introduced it to Jim Crow, let Jim Crow, that was another from 1877 all the way until the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and 1964, all those. That's 100 years where they had a chance to do it. Then after the Civil Rights of 1964 and 1965, America had a chance to confront racists. And what they decided to do was go from having an explicit apartheid system to having an implicit apartheid system. And from 1965 just to 1970, they immediately started to get rid of just many small efforts called affirmative action when they could have dealt with it. But then that's when they went with they called the Southern strategy, right? When they said, well, we'll just use dog whistles. We'll just say things like low taxes and busing and things of that nature. And so we're in another era, right, where post George Floyd moment, and it really post Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown moment, America could have said, we're going to address racism and become anti-racist. But again, as you can see in this current moment we're in, most of the position is how do we accommodate racists? And what do I mean by how do we accommodate racists? Well, if you look at all of that period from Jim Crow, the Jim Crow era, right? All of the policies, and like for instance, when you look at something as wild and seemed detached when Hugh Hefner tried to get a Playboy show on the air. One of his first acts he wanted to have was Nat King Cole, right? And he wanted to have, I think, Ella Fitzgerald, something like that. They were like, we can't have them on the show because the people in the South won't watch it because the people in the South don't want to see white people socializing with Negroes. What I'm saying is that it was always an accommodation. Every policy, everything they took into mind is how do we not make the Southerners mad?
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
And that's the same thing that's guiding. How do we not make these white militias mad? Right? It's never a critique. So for instance, the president passed an executive order challenging anybody who has a federal contract on having any kind of training that deals with diversity, equity, and inclusion through a particular perspective as far as whiteness, right? But we know by the FBI over studies for the past 40 years that the biggest domestic threat is white militias. And there has been not one executive order signed, even has identified them as the biggest internal threat, right? But they want to say that Black Lives Matter is a threat. They want to say that diversity trainings is a threat. This system has to come to terms with the fact that it has positioned itself on not how to eliminate racism, but how do we best accommodate it? And we have to ask ourselves, why does this system decide to accommodate racism?
You know, because we obviously live in a racist society, and our government.
Yeah, but what is the advantage? What is the
right.
What is it that racists hold that people feel like they have to accommodate? See, that's the thing. What is it that they have?
You know, it's this deep dive. I mean, it's gotten even deeper into the space of. I'm hearing that now out of the White House, and this is why we're making the case as to what I talked about earlier about damage control. The White House, if you have a company and you have a contract with the government, they have now implemented a check on whether you have a diversity program at your company. And if you have implemented a diversity program at your company, it's putting your contract in jeopardy. They literally will take that contract away from you because they found out about your diversity program or your diversity training.
Yep.
Like, so when I talked earlier about the fact that we need to vote for damage control, this is exactly what I'm talking about, because that's crazy that you would actually have in the White House or implemented in government through an administration that they would sit there and look at your company's policy as it relates to diversity training and yank your contract based on that.
Yeah, and it's a whole history behind that, which I'm not going to even break down because that's like my wheelhouse. But what I will say to the point that you're making is this, and this is where it comes down to in your argument about do the least damage. And it's a very salient issue. COVID-19. Right? COVID-19 is disproportionately killing Black people.
Black people.
Right? And it's disproportionately killing Black people, not because we're out partying more than people or we're not following the rules more than people. It's that we typically become the essential workers. We're the ones who are the clerks and working at the front desk in the stores. And
we're going to be exposed to it.
We're exposed more, right? And then we have most likely to not have the health care coverage or to most disproportionately be impacted by certain ailments. And so with these pre-existing conditions and things of that nature. So if you just look at just COVID-19 and the fact that close to 300,000 Americans are going to be dead by the time next week comes because of this, and a disproportionate number are African-American and Latinx, and you're talking about damage control, that there's no way that no matter who the candidate was, that no way someone from the Democratic Party was not going to follow science. Right.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about. I mean, now we have, and you have to understand that this is how powerful it is. Now, the leading voice from the White House on a pandemic, a global pandemic, is a radiologist. right? Because everybody who was a master and showed efficacy in infectious disease for over 30 years were not saying what they wanted to say. So we've landed on the policy of how we deal with a global pandemic that has killed 300,000 people is a radiologist, because he's willing to go on television and parrot what the administrator wants to say. So when you talk about least damage, we don't even have to be hypothetical. We don't have to talk about cars. We are in a COVID-19 moment. But you have to understand also, this connects directly with this 30-year process of debunking science for the betterment of what? Shareholders, right? Because talking about climate change and talk about the connection to science is problematic when you have petroleum companies. And petroleum companies don't want to talk about how it's impacting the climate. And so what I'm saying is that this is a slippery slope. Once you start debunking science over here around climate change, it's easy to debunk it right here in your face, where you're literally having bodies stacked up in hospitals and in freezers and in vehicles, right? It's because now everything is in question. And that's one of the strategies, right, of particular regimes, is to put everything in question and to say nothing is really true. And the only thing that's true is what I'm telling you, and I'm the only person who can save you. At that point, you're no longer even dealing in a democratic republic, for better or for worse.
Right.
Although it's laced with white supremacy, although it's laced with racism, you're not even dealing with the structure anymore, right? And that's what we have to understand, is that we are moving towards a dictatorial, authoritarian structure where there are no laws that are developed by people in communities. The laws only come from, right, that one person who is the savior of everyone and who is right about everything. Things that they're totally ignorant on, they're right about it, right? And that's what we're talking about. So you're talking about, you're not necessarily voting for Joe Biden and his policy in 1984 and his policy in 1992. You're saying, are we going to go towards the authoritarian track where anybody who has any type of mastery at any subject is debunked because it doesn't fit right with them? Or are you going to go with some people who appear to be somewhat reasonable, right? And can talk to scientists and can talk to experts and actually literally reason around some things. And even though it may shake out to a point where we don't get everything that we need, right? Or we're not considered the way in which
we already know is going to happen.
Right? We know that ultimately in a moment like COVID-19, the decisions are going to be different. When you're picking Supreme Court justices, the decisions are going to be different. When you're packing the courts with all of these judges at the federal level, all throughout the United States in these various circuits, the decisions are going to be different. When you put a brain surgeon over the HUD department, when you put a woman who has no background in education over education, right? So all I'm saying is that there's going to be different kinds of decisions made. There's going to be different kinds of reliability on experts, regardless of how flawed the experts are.
Man,
right now, we're dealing in this place that debunks all expertise, because experts aren't needed when you're not dealing in the area of facts. What you have to understand about the elite is this. They don't have to deal with none of the decisions that they're making. They don't have to give a damn about healthcare, because they make so much money they ain't got to have no plan.
And I get to go to Walter Reed and have 12 doctors who are the top experts in all these kinds of fields. I get the experimental cocktails that nobody else has access to. Right? That's what these Trump followers don't get. They don't understand. You're not going to get the same kind of health care that your president is getting. Right?
They're not going to get none of the health care, because every law that he's trying to pass is trying to remove the little health care that they got. So they're not going to get the health care. The elite don't care about your health care. The elite don't care about a minimum wage, because they never had to work for minimum wage. Right?
Period.
So all of these things that these people are touting, that's telling you shouldn't worry about, right? They don't have to worry about climate change, right? Because they have remote places where the climate is okay. So this is the thing that critical thinking has to be, is that when someone's giving you some kind of message, right, you have to say, let me kind of do a comparative analysis. Like, this don't match, right?
This doesn't match.
How is it a bad idea for everybody to have health coverage? And who would it be a bad idea to? Because it's my tax dollars. So it's my tax dollars. I get to decide on what these, who would benefit from me not having health care. That makes, and then if we look at across the world, we're not operating in a vacuum. Let's look at other nations that have universal health care. Wow, it's working. Oh, they're paying what? A couple more $1,000s or more in taxes? Well, I'm paying a couple more $1,000s in taxes for airplanes that never gonna fly, that Texas are never gonna fly. So yeah, and I'm gonna get free health care? Wow, how did that become a bad idea? How the fact that I won't go bankrupt if I get a terminal illness? See, one thing about COVID-19 is this, is that people who are surviving, they're getting a bill. And these bills are getting somewhat upward to $500,000. One person got a bill for $2 million, right? Now, some of that they didn't have to cover because they actually had health care. But what I'm talking about is that, like, this is the kind of conversations we need to have. Why are these things that support the citizens of the nation bad ideas? Who are they only bad ideas for?
You know, it's so crazy to even now we know all of this. We know this. Even the people who are arguing the nonsense, they kind of know it too. But I want to talk about how our younger males who are not getting it, why I think they are aligned with Trump. And I talked about this recently. I actually had done a post that I didn't get to post because I had been doing all kinds of craziness, and I was like, you know what? I'll just do it live on Sunday. Some of our brothers who deal out of this vacuum that they think is, I don't know, I don't even like using the term hip hop because some of it is not really hip hop. Like, we're hip hop heads, so you know where I'm going with this. But what they call rap, or whatever they refer to it as now, but yeah, we can address it as hip hop for now. There is misogyny in some of that music. There's paper chasing in that music. It's really about me in that music. Nobody else matters. And there is no accountability in that messaging. So it makes perfect sense that a young male who is listening to this music, who is aspiring to be the next whoever, Donald Trump would be their hero, because really, when they align themselves with Donald Trump, what they're really saying is, you know what? If I was running the country, that's how I would run it too. I wouldn't have any accountability. I would be running around, and if I was running a beauty pageant, I would run up in there and look at all of the breasts as they're walking around and go, calm down. I run this pageant, you're fine. Or buy off a porn star. What does that sound like? Yeah, that sounds like a cat that's doing a music video, right? That sounds like a cat that's got misogyny all through his lyrics. So really, Donald Trump represents to many of these young males who are in that space and ascribing to these theories and ideologies. This dude is actually somewhat of a hero to them. What are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, what it is values alignment, right? In the old days, the monarch, right, and the people who were close to the monarch all had all of the wealth and the riches, and everybody else was serfs. And you can clearly see a distinction in the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor. It was a clearly a line. And so that's why every time there was an uprising, They cut the king's head off. And so people was like, you know what? We can't keep having this thing where those of us in charge keep getting our heads cut off. Right? That's not a good transfer of power. So what we have to do is we have to do two things. We have to create a buffer class that's between the real poor and us. They're not that big, but they're a buffer. And it also gives people hope, right? That they can be like us too. And so once we not only create the buffer class, the other thing, and that's why you only hear them talk about the middle class. Right. You only hear people talk, they never talk about any other class.
Right.
Politicians only talk about the middle class because that's their buffer class.
That's the buffer class.
The second thing they did is they said, we have to give them our values, right? They can't have different values, right? So they have to have our values. And that was one of the most powerful transfers that Elite did, was give elite values to poor people. Not only do you see it in these rappers, but you see it in the last election when you had Joe the plumber, right? He was like, I don't want to tax the rich. And he was like, well, why don't you want to tax the rich? He's like, because I don't want to get taxed like that. They said, what do you do? He said, I'm an unemployed plumber. They're like, you don't even get taxed that way. But he said, what? I'm dreaming of starting a business. If I have a business, I don't want to be in that tax.
I don't want to be taxed.
And that's exactly what happened with the rapper who you're mentioning, Mr. Dwayne Carter. Mr. Dwayne Carter saw that people who make over $400,000 will be taxed in a certain way under a Biden administration. And he said, I don't want to be taxed in that kind of way.
By the way, for all those who are hip-hop unsavvy, that's Lil Wayne.
Yeah, Dwayne Carter, Lil Wayne, Lil Tunechi. And so he said he didn't want to be taxed that way, right? Like he's like a one-issue voter, which is a whole nother thing about that. But totally. With that being said, you also hear a whole lot of people, regardless of race, who make no more than $70,000 a year, railing about this tax hike for people who make over $400,000 a year. Because again, the myth of rags to riches is like, I'm broke as a joke now.
But tomorrow,
in a few years, once I start streaming, or once my YouTube channel hits, or once I get picked to be on a reality show,
when I cut enough heads,
yeah, or once I, date one of these basketball players, I'm gonna be in that bracket. And so I'm gonna fight now for something that I don't have, and in the foreseeable future I won't have, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so this is what we're seeing. And so you're right. The actual prototype that's represented in the White House now is this megalomaniac, right? All powerful, hyper sexist, hyper misogynist, right? Who's on record, as sexual assault and all these other types of things, right? And it's like, yeah, that kind of sounds like the kind of person that I want to be, right? Because that aligns with the values of the elite. And that's one of the most powerful things. Stephen Biko, who was a South African student leader and leader of what they call the Black Conscience Movement in South Africa during apartheid, he has a quote that says, the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Mm. So if we look at Stephen Biko's his proposition, right, that the greatest weapon they have is the mind of the oppressed, is that when you monitor, right, the diet that we've been given, right, not just the physical diet, which is destroying our physical person, but the misinformation, the disinformation, the aspirations and desires. So you have to understand that a society like the United States of America, and all societies, are based on one particular thing that keeps it going. And I don't care what society it is what do the people desire and who has the power to supply it? And one of the most important things that people don't understand about systems is that systems are designed to create desire. And then they're designed to what? Fulfill that desire.
Desire. At any cost. Man.
And my identity, because you're talking about male versus man, my identity is connected to how close I reach these desires that have been created in me. I don't even know why I want something that has that brand name on it. I don't know why. People don't know why.
That I can't even pronounce.
Yeah, why is this elite, right? Because you have to understand that that's how systems work, right? In some cases, if you're sitting on the floor, you have the best seats in the house. In other cases, if you're in the balcony, you have the best seats in the house. It all depends on the desire that's been created by the ruling class. But people don't understand how arbitrary it is. When people say stuff like, oh, well, race is a social construct, everything is a social construct. The economy is a social construct. The way in which we go about healthcare is a social construct. Working in a cubicle is a social construct. So what we have to understand is that when we're examining these people who are making these decisions in public spaces and then being exploited, because as soon as one step out, there's going to be a picture taken with them. It's going to be blasted all over as evidence, right? And see, not all of them think like that, and they're with me, which is another ploy. But the thing about it is that if I have the same values as this particular community, and I'm talking about value materially and intrinsically, like you know, just the you know, oh, wealth, women, trophies, and you know, whatever. If I have those values, why have they created that desire in me? They created the desire because they're the ones who can feel it. That's how economies work, right? Like that's what an economy is, right? It's a people have a desire and then people come to fulfill it, right? And so that's what we have to do. So to really talk about this issue, you know, as we get ready to wrap up, you know, you showed your T-shirt. I'm gonna show my T-shirt, right? My T-shirt is a throwback from the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party that was developed in 64 through 68, and this is about particularly Fannie Lou Hamer, who, as a Black woman who was a sharecropper in Mississippi, and when Fannie Lou Hamer was found out when she started to work with the Freedom Riders and was going to vote, they kicked her entire family off of the plantation where they were sharecropping, and she immersed herself and her family in this entire work of getting the electoral franchise for our people. And they went to the Democratic Convention, and they fought to have seats alongside of the white, what they call Dixiecrats, right? But she was imprisoned, right? She was beaten, right? She put her life on the line, right? And this is not going back to the old thing like, well, people die for you to vote. I'm just talking about what you have to understand, that this stuff isn't a vacuum, and it's not a trajectory, and it's not to be guilting people into it. But what I'm saying is that she was beaten, she was imprisoned, right? And she was publicly humiliated on multiple occasions in her effort to get us the electoral franchise. Now, what does she know in the 1960s that we don't know, right?
Now.
And what she knew, right? What she knew, and what the brothers and sisters who were in Mississippi and brothers and sisters who were in Alabama who started the first Black Panther Party, what they knew that we didn't know, right, is that you have to engage the seat of power, right, in a meaningful way and make them contend with you from a position of strength. One of the reasons why we're having challenges when it comes to the electoral franchise is that we're not negotiating from a position of strength. And the way that you negotiate from a position of strength is you bring both your human resources, your fiscal, financial resources, and your intellectual resources to bear, right? In order to see your agenda in action. And so my plea for everyone is to make a thoughtful, reasonable decision. If you haven't already voted and did participate in early voting or mail-in votes, to make a reasonable decision when you're at the poll. But don't let that be your final political act for another 4 years.
Yes.
This is where we have to develop agendas, leverage our power, our fiscal power, our intellectual power, and our human resources to negotiate from a position of power to where we're no longer saying, well, they're not doing nothing for Black people. No. They're going to be in a position where they have to do something for us when we engage in a particular kind of way. And that's going to make the difference from now into the next election.
Bro, that's it in a nutshell. Look what happened in the 4 years where we went to sleep again. It feels like, as Black people, it feels like we're constantly hitting the snooze button. So we wake up in enough time to either engage the election or not. And then after it's over and whoever's in power, then we go back to sleep. and then the alarm goes off as soon as the election comes back up, and then we're engaged again before we hit the snooze button again. We got to turn the snooze button off, and we got to be engaged. When we vote Joe Biden in, and again, look, I said this earlier, your vote is your voice. Your vote is your values. So you got to vote your values in this election. And if you are a Black person, chances are it's not this administration. Whoever is in office when this election is over, we can't hit the snooze button, go back to sleep, and wait. Go back into hibernation and wait another 4 years before we get engaged again. We got to start holding some people accountable right from the gate so that we can get our needs met. And that really is the end game, which really doesn't end. But that's really what has to happen after this election is over, that we hold people accountable. So to all of our brothers who are out here, when you're listening to this conversation, we want you to know we get it. We understand how pissed off you are. We understand how frustrated you are. We understand how deactivating it is to feel like your voice isn't being heard. But my brothers, I want you to understand this. In order for you to be the kind of man that you were intended to be when you were created, you have got to engage this process. This is not about electing a perfect candidate, because those don't exist. It's about electing someone who will be able to address enough of the issues that will stop the hemorrhaging, that will prevent us from bleeding out totally. Because right now, what we have on our hands, we are on the ground and bleeding out, and no one is coming to stop the bleeding. In fact, they're telling people, go the opposite way and let them bleed out. That's what's happening right now. And we got to have someone in office that will stop the hemorrhaging. So please get engaged. Please vote. We need this. My brother Lasana, I now understands the lid is off we done took the lid off the box now. Everybody knows who you are now, because I reference you often as my brother, as part of my council, a brother who I respect and love so much, and now everybody knows why. So I suspect that there may be a podcast in our future. I'm just saying, and I don't care whether you want to do one or not. So I'm gonna come back to that. I'm gonna circle back to that. I'm sure the people gonna be voting for that. Look, they're like, yes. So we're gonna get to that. But fam, as always, supreme pleasure. We got to do it more often because people need to hear the truth.
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate you.
All right, fam. In a minute.
Peace.
My people, whoa. An action-packed almost 2 hours. Almost 2 hours of why we need to be engaged. If anyone knows of a brother who is not, and again, my sisters, please don't feel slighted. Please don't feel disrespected. You all have been engaged. If you look at this flyer, it literally was talking about the fact that our brothers are not engaged. And so this discussion was about how to activate our brothers to get involved, get engaged, perform our civic duties. We have got to vote. Shout out to my brothers, Omar Dorsey and Anthony Mackey, who sent me this shirt. I am a man. Vote. This is their thing. I always have to shout out my bros that get it in. But family, please pass this. This will be up on my IGTV. So while we're getting ready to sign off on the live, it's going to live on my IGTV. Send this to somebody. Send this link to somebody. Have them watch it. The nuggets that are up there are all throughout. Have them fast forward to our session with Lasana if you want. But there were so many by my brother Jeff Hood and my brother Alfred Edmond and Lasana and I knew it was going to go down like that, which is why I had to have him come on last, because we always go scuba diving. But family, I love y'all. We got to stop the hemorrhaging. We got to do damage control. We got to vote this idiot out, because we bleeding out here. Let's go. Let's get it. I love y'all. As always, peace.